everybody to the Haunted Hacker episode number 39. Tonight we have Rob Newby. I will introduce him in a little bit. A little bit of news and housekeeping before we get started. Bear with me on this connection. We've had some bad storms lately in Alabama, and so my connection is in and out. So if I accidentally disconnect, I'll be right back. So news for today. Not a whole lot of news. I've been heads under the water trying to manage a SOC and dealing with some incident responses and some crazy stuff. So that's that. Also, we have a new, well, it's not really a new podcast, but it's a new show that's going to feature our group. Tina Gravel and David are going to be putting on a show sometime soon. They approached me about it last week and was telling me about how they wanted to help out our group and our community. So look for that coming up shortly. Other than that, no huge news except for the US is under like major issues with the jab and COVID and all that nonsense. I think we're going back to a mask mandate, as well as some cities possibly going into lockdown. We have DEF CON coming up, and a lot of people are actually boycotting DEF CON strictly because of the fact that Black Hat is allowing vendors and basically telling people that mask is optional. So a lot of security professionals and vendors are pulling out of the conference because of that, because they want to protect their family and themselves. And Las Vegas right now is one of the hottest cities for COVID spread of the variant D, which is pretty lethal right now. I guess it infects you with just as much antibodies as the first, or just as much of the virus as a first strain that hit Europe. So that being said, let's get it kicked off. Rob, I saw your LinkedIn, I follow you, I see some of the work that you've done. CEO, founder extraordinaire, on the board of how many companies? Like at least 4 or 5. Pretty impressive. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Maybe. Some.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about
Sure. Yeah, so Rob Newby, as you say, I'm sitting on advisory boards for 3 or 4 other startups, and I've also got my own startup at the moment. But I've been in security for about 25 years, probably the same sort of length of time as you have, Mike. But very much from the kind of the corporate side, the defender side. Always done it from within a business. Started my way like from the very bottom, started on operations desks, help desks, that kind of thing, before there was even such a thing as security, and it grew from there. So there was one of the first jobs that I did, the IT operations role. I would build things that would monitor other systems, because we didn't have such thing, there was no SIMs or anything back then. There was nothing to do any monitoring, so I would build systems that would do that. Then I actually, because I'd had that experience, I moved into the reseller side, actually into the channel, and got involved in selling secure ID, so RSA products, and then Encipher cards, so crypto cards. And that really started a bit of a love affair with the techie side, the really like complex maths, I think, was what appealed to me back in those days. And I just followed that, and I followed it and not on a predefined course in any way, but I always wanted to be doing the next thing. And when I got to a certain point, so when you're on a help desk, it's easy to see, well, there's other things you can do. Once you get to a certain point, so I spent a long time consulting and then in architecture, and I didn't really know where to go. And it was almost by accident that I became a CISO. I was approached and somebody said, would you like to do this CISO role? So I did, and I went into that, and I finished just before the pandemic hit. So it was a contract, and I finished at the end of 2019. And at that point, I'd been offered the job as a permanent role, and I turned it down because I couldn't see it as a long-term career for me. And I'd had some issues with reporting to the board, and actually having kind of a clarity of message. And I had a very clear idea of how to do it and what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find any products that did it. So I thought, well, I've come from a product background originally. I know how the product side of life works. I know how the channel works. Why don't I give it a go? So I did, back just as the world was going into lockdown, I was starting my own company, and I found a developer 3 days before we went into lockdown over here back in March. Then we had an MVP out by July, and then I've just been kind of talking to people about it ever since, and trying to get people interested and seeing what it's about. But it's working. We did a beta release yesterday, actually, so we're now trying to find our next round of customers to come and try it out and see if it works for them.
Yeah, so if any CISOs out there want to try out
bring it on.
Rogue Garden product, feel free to holler.
So tell us a little bit about your product. Tell us a little bit about Proposal.
So the problem that I had is I found that I was continually doing or wanting to do maturity assessments. So CISOs quite often get into a bad habit, I think it is, of just reporting on risk all the time. And, I think coming from, as you do, from the more offensive side rather than the defensive side, you don't see the whole community around the defensive side. Well, you do now because you're working on that side, but there's so much of that goes on, and decision making isn't done in the same way as it is on the offensive side. On the offensive side, you're like, well, I'm going to try that, and you try it, and if it works, you carry on. On the defensive side, you've got to go, well, I think this is going to work, so I'm going to go and convince someone to give me some money to try it out, and if it works, then I'll build something else on top of it, and that takes 3 months to get the money, and then another 3 months to build it. So 6 months later, you finally get to try and do what you wanted to do 6 months ago. And it's massively unsatisfying to go through that amount of governance and, just red tape most of the time. So I wanted to, in my consultancy work, what I've done is I've gone in, I've run maturity assessments, and then come back and presented a whole piece of work around that, saying this is what your target operating model should look like. These are the people you should have doing these processes. These are the tools you need to buy to support those and automate them. And after a while, it started to feel a little bit cookie cutter. There wasn't anything that I was doing that felt particularly new. So I thought, well, it'd be interesting if I could automate that. The things that I know to be true, can I put those into, hard code them into a system, and keep on running that. So that's what we've tried to do. And you don't realize until you start doing it, actually, how much of it is unwritten. It's in there, and it's from experience. It's not something you can actually apply to paper, which was an interesting thing to find out. But what we're trying to then do is actually have a continual feedback loop. So instead of the way it's done now on spreadsheets, going out, sending one spreadsheet out to 25 people in your team and getting 25 different spreadsheets back with lots of different types and shapes and sizes of information, just sending out one link to people coming into the system, or putting their own information, but in a specified way that we're setting, and just having that picture build up from the bottom up. So at the moment, it's all manual, it's all kind of people driven, but then later on, it's going to be tool driven as well. There'll be, KPIs, metrics, that kind of thing being fed into the tool. And then having that picture at the very top level, where typically the CISO is talking to either other technical management, or more commonly now move straight into the board and the CEO and the exco. And that's really that was the problem that I'd faced, was that I reported directly into a CEO who didn't know security very well. He kind of knew what it was, he knew a few buzzwords, but he didn't know how it worked. and my exco certainly didn't know anything about it. So the first thing I wanted to teach them was what security is, and then I wanted to report on that. So, you know, give them a framework and then say, this is how that framework is going to change over time. So it's just something that I needed in my role, and I spoke to other people and said, do you need this? And they said that, you know, that basically people were saying that there was nothing that they knew of that existed. I decided to go and build it myself.
That's pretty awesome. The communication with the board, I think, has always been the most challenging for me, even on the offensive side. Boards are pretty much metric driven. And, you know, when you show them a maturity model, they equate that to dollar and cents.
Yes.
So I think your model is perfect. What do you think that your biggest challenge is with starting this new business and producing this platform that gives them that maturity model?
The challenges have changed as we've gone through. To start with, it was knowing whether it was a good idea or not. And that's a pretty easy one to knock off. And I was really, really lucky that I am in that CISO position, and I've got a network of CISOs that I can talk to, and, you know, we bounce ideas off each other all the time. So I used WhatsApp groups because this was, again, back in kind of early pandemic times. That was probably the number one. The thing I was being asked the most by the people in the startup community was, is there a product market fit? Which basically means, does the market want it? Is it something that people are going to, you know, ask for and look for? And I was being told yes, you know, that I had a ready-made market out there at my fingertips, and they were all giving me lots of feedback and lots of interest in it. That quickly leads on to the second problem, which is that you realize that people quite often say it's interesting, but they're very unlikely to part with money until it's perfect. So finding people to actually try that out for you, and people that will give you enough feedback to make it sellable. And we're very lucky to have 2 or 3 very early customers who are willing to put money into it. And we've now got to a point where we're at our beta phase, where, you know, we can start saying, actually, you're going to pay for this. But we're still getting people running, you know, we run 3-month trials before we sell it. So it's not something.
Surely being in a group with really, really amazing security professionals like the InfoStep group is helping you out there, Rob, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Always.
So there's a group in the UK called the CISO Alliance Group. I don't know if you've been part of that or communicated with them. That's another good testing ground for getting products out. I'm on the board of a couple companies. Yeah, they're pretty good. And I'll give you a link to them. I'm on a couple boards over in the UK. One is Jenny, and then the other one is the Paradox Tree. And what I find interesting about being on the board is the decisions that twist and turn and develop the company to what it becomes. And one of the guys on the board and one of the founders of one of the companies I'm with is only like 17 years old, Vincent Cook. Pretty amazing guy.
Yes, I think Tinesh told me about him.
Yeah, he's I'm on the board.
Vincent, he's cool.
Yeah. I'm on the board of Tinesh's company, and it seems like there's a very close-knit group of startups and founders over in the UK, and I really miss that.
Yes.
But what is your biggest challenge with the board, do you think, with the results from your model and communicating that to a board level? What would you say is the hardest thing to get across to the board?
The complexity of it, which is exactly why I created it. And you talked about something that I hadn't mentioned, but something that you very quickly hit on was it's all about the cost. So it's if you've got an eye on the complexity of security, you're always down in the weeds. And if you then want to talk about cost, you very quickly get almost like rabbit in the headlights. Like, hang on, there's that thing over there, and there's 12 things over there, and I've got all these components. I don't know exactly how much it costs. They don't care about that. They want to know roughly what's it going to cost, rough order of magnitude. Is it feasible? Is it going to pay me back that money in terms of either risk reduction or business improvement? There's either upside or downside for every financial decision made, and that's pretty much all they're going to care about. If they want to know more detail, and there's some very bright people on boards, then they need the ability to drill down into it. So, and there will be somebody on every exco or every board you go to who will have that knowledge, and they will be able to challenge you all the way down to that ground level. And I just wanted to have that at my fingertips at all time, because I don't like having to think too quickly. I like having the detail. I like being thorough about what I'm saying. I don't like to leave any gaps. But likewise, I know that I've got to go in there. I've got to say, I need £6 million because I need to build a SOC, and it's going to give you X, Y, Z, and that's going to, potentially stop you from a £500 million ransomware attack.
Yeah. How do you demonstrate that return on investment? Like, what are the key factors that you need to show a board to, basically to sell it to get that £6 million?
I think it's being able to tell them a story. So you do have to talk about risk, but you also have to talk about the upside. And that's the thing that the CISOs quite often miss, because they're used to talking about the risk. It's like, oh, there's something big and scary over there, and it's going to cost you lots of money. And here's a way to do it, to protect yourself against it. A lot of kind of senior management will say, well, we've never seen that kind of happen before, so we'll defer that, or we'll avoid that some other way, and we're not going to give you the money you want. If you can demonstrate a benefit to having it, or an ongoing benefit, like, so for the SOC example, I can stop a single ransomware attack, which might cost you 10 times what I pay for it, but also I can stop 20 ransomware attacks happening, or we can at least recover quickly. So it's going to stop our paying operational costs as well. So it's having, in simple terms, things which are very complicated, and having it in high terms, but that you can go deeper into that detail if you need to later on.
Okay, so that's like your bricks and mortar kind of thing, not really bricks and mortar, but a SOC. It's something you see, something that's there. What about for something that's more ephemeral, like business intelligence, or like the dark web intel, stuff like this? How would you sell that to a board?
Okay, putting me on the spot.
That's what it's all about, mate.
like I say, I would probably take weeks over this. How would I talk about intelligence? Well, that's it. So the way that I started with every board that I've ever been involved with, because I've done this as a consultant more than I've done it as an actual CISO, is to go in and explain the steps of security, how you basically identify where the risks are, and then you can protect against them before you pick them up in your environment and then respond to them operationally. So it's about, if you're talking about threat intel, then you're basically saying you need to have this to know what is hitting you. Everything that security does is around responding to threats in some way. So if you know what threats are out there, you've got 100% better chance of responding to them than if you don't know what's out there. And make it simple for us, if you're always coming with the same language about what you're doing, and they very quickly get used to the way that you're talking. I think some people are afraid of coming across as not being original or something like that, but actually if you're saying the same words over again to them, they go, right, okay, so yeah, I know what this guy does. He's the guy that defends from threats. and we have to help him do this. So if he tell, you know, and I think another mistake that people fall into is trying to explain too much of the job that they do, because a board will hire you, or an exco will hire you because you're the expert. They, you know, if you've got through those 3 or 4 rounds of interviews to get the job in the first place, or 6 in the case of a lot of USs, if you got through those rounds of interviews, they pretty much accepted that you are the person for the job, and you know what you're doing, and they want to leave it up to you, and they want to trust you. And the minute they start challenging that, or they start you know, not trusting you, then that's when you've got a problem. So the mistake people are making is that they're going in and they're explaining, oh, I'm doing this because. It's like, no, you don't need to know that. You don't need to make excuses for what you're doing. Just say, we are doing this, and we're going to do it because. And then the financial side, that's not the excuse. That's the upside and the downside. That's not the, we do it because this is what happens in security. It's like, yeah, okay, we understand that, you know, security. Talk to us about the business, and that's the gap that a lot of CISOs need to still close, particularly over here in the UK. I think in the US it's becoming a lot more like that. The CISOs are a lot more business focused.
Yeah.
Over here there's a lot more technical focus still.
I was going to say, I think that's because a lot of CISOs that I've talked to, they've come up through that kind of technical route though. So they've been like,
you have to. You absolutely have to. I mean, as I say, I've had 25 years in security, and the first 10 to 15, probably 12 of those were in technical roles.
But you'd be surprised, I mean, with the amount of CISOs that I talk to, so when I bring them into the mentoring thing, there's been about 3 or 4 who have said they've got no technical background whatsoever. So like, well, not no technical background, but limited technical background. Like Steve Trippier at in Water, he was a project manager, and he's always had a project management background rather than a technical background. And if I ever talk to him about,
that's the whole Dunning-Kruger thing, though. That's them thinking they're not technically capable. If you have a conversation with Steve, you'll quickly realize that he's got a pretty good handle on it. You need to have enough technical knowledge so that somebody can't pull the wool over your eyes. That's the best way.
How do you choose what company to approach with your platform, with your services? What level, what timeline of maturity do you look for to introduce yourself and what you guys do?
I don't think we've been that considered about it yet. I think we've just we've you know, done the fanfare and asked people to come and have a go. And realistically, there shouldn't be any level of maturity that you can't use it, because it's assessing that maturity and it's telling you, okay, where do you want to get to? What's your target? You know, you set the target, and then it tells you what the gap is. So we're not quite at the stage where it can tell you what the, you know, every single piece of work is going to be and how that's going to be priced up, but that's where we're heading to. So it's effectively doing a gap analysis for you and setting up a bunch of projects, which will then cost up for you, ROM costs again. So again, you can take that as a business case over to your board and say, I want to build that SOC. It's going to cost 6 million quid. And here's the business case. These are the people I need. These are the tools I need. You know, and this is how much of that gap it's going to close. So, sorry, I forgot. Where was I going with that? Where was the question?
So do you work with partners? Do you work with partners as well? Like, you know, third-party SOCs?
Yeah, we're just starting to.
Cool.
Yeah, we're just starting to work with partners. That is essentially, they tend to be consultancies or resellers who have larger pieces of work going on with kind of bigger customers. And at the moment, we are finding that it typically sits better with the larger customers because it helps them get a handle on the complexity of their estates. So we've got resellers who are coming in with some quite large customers and saying, look, I'm selling them this solution, which has multiple features underneath it, and I'm looking for something that I can put over the top of that, and it can almost manage what we're doing. It can show that the gap that we're closing, and it can show how we're improving things on their estate.
Very cool. So, we've talked about the startup, and we've talked about, your board memberships and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about who Rob is. What do you do on your spare time, and what do you enjoy doing outside of all of the board work and the chaos?
There's not a lot of it left after that. I've got three little boys, aged 6, 10, and 11. I had to think
I was going
about
to say
that.
they're not little anymore, Rob. They're quite big.
They're not. Yeah, they are quite big. Yeah, the biggest one particularly. He's just left primary school.
Rody just said they like to get sports injuries.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I've got one who's in a boot at the moment because he's broken his ankle. My eldest has had a broken wrist twice in the last year, and it's all from football. So yeah, they like to hurt themselves. So they take up a lot of my time. I've actually just started I've taken on coaching my middle son's football team, because he wasn't going to get a game otherwise. So he was playing with my eldest son, and they wouldn't let him basically play in the team. He could only do training. So now I've taken on an under-11s football team, and I didn't actually play football until I was 40. So this is going to be quite interesting.
I'm not going to lie, this sounds like nepotism.
It is. Oh, it totally is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I say it as though he couldn't get a game unless he was in, but actually it's the other way around. Yeah, he gets to play wherever he likes because I'm the boss. Yeah, that's
I find it pretty interesting that you're part of a board and you have all these companies and startup that you have any time for yourself. Because I know being on the board of multiple companies, it feels like each company is a full-time job. And it's a lot of fun to see things grow.
Yeah, man.
It's a lot of juggling. There's so there are 4 companies, and there's one of them doesn't take up a lot of time. I'm not going to name names, but one of them doesn't take up a lot of my time at all. And one of them, when I started, took huge amounts of time, and that's kind of dropped off over the time. I think the reason they wanted me involved at the point that I got involved, which was when I was still working as a CISO, was because they wanted me for that CISO profile and introductions to other CISOs. And then over time, that's dropped away. They've kept me on because it's always useful to have that kind of connection. But I think they're less reliant on me. They've got a big kind of sales arm now and everything. And the last one where I'm actually a non-executive director, that is the one which I'm most naturally involved with. So that doesn't really feel like there's a lot of work there. We're in continual conversation, continual contact. There's kind of, they're arranging things like golf days for their clients and things like that. And they invite me along, and it's, it's kind of nice. It feels a lot more natural like that. So, and it's a bit, sorry.
I was going to say, what other things are you involved in, Rob Newby? There's one on your t-shirt.
Oh, the Info Step Challenge. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Rob, because I don't know anything about it.
I got roped in. What can I say? Yeah, that's all your fault. I don't know. I guess I needed some exercise or something.
Let me give you a hint on how to win that challenge. Go ahead and take your Fitbit and put it on your dog and kick it out and make it run the streets.
Yeah.
Totally win.
I haven't got a dog. That's the problem. Mind you, I have got 3 kids, and they're pretty much moving all day. So that might be the next time. We've actually, because since the middle one's had his broken ankle, one of us has had to be in the house all the time because he can't leave. It's the summer holidays now. My eldest has been playing football. My youngest has been playing football, and the middle one's stuck in the house feeling really sorry for himself. So one of us has had to be sitting with him all of the time. So whereas I would go out first thing in the morning, lunchtime, and then last thing in the evening, I'm lucky to get one of those in at the moment. So this week has been my lowest week yet.
Rob, I also know how you feel that you said you were disadvantaged being tall, because me and Rosie have been doing. Sorry. Me and Rosie have done the exact same thing today. We've done all of the same things because I've been at her house since this morning. Since last night. She's done how many thousand? 10,304 steps, and I've done 6,000. But we've not marked anywhere differently. We've done the exact same shit.
Empirical proof.
Yeah, got a photo earlier, and there's like a 3-foot height difference between the two of us.
I know.
Only about
I've seen it.
Water.
I know. The thing is, I knew this because the one who's got the broken leg at the moment, he's always on the move, which makes it doubly hard for him at the moment. But I took him for a walk. He's got a little Fitbit thing on it that he wears on his wrist, and we went for the same walk around the golf course, which is just over the road. When I came back, he said, "Dad, I've done 12,000 steps," and I looked at mine, and I'd done 5,000. I was like, "It's just because he's got little legs."
Yeah, for short people. It's
easy for short people. You get all the steps in.
No, it's not. We're more knackered. We haven't got the length.
So Rob, where do you see the biggest challenge post-pandemic as far as the security industry goes? Personally, I think that ransomware has taken charge. But I don't think it's the end of our issues. Where do you see the problems coming up?
I don't think it's ever really changed, has it? I think, it's behavior, it's people's behavior, and trying to change it and trying to influence it, and you can't. And I think, I'm certainly feeling it, and I think other people will be to a greater or lesser extent, that if things go back to normal, whatever that looks like, what's the working day going to look like? I don't want to ever get back on I won't say ever. I don't feel like getting back on a train to London right now and spending an hour and a half commuting, and then do the same at the end of a really long day and coming back again. I love being able to walk up the garden and see my kids at 5:30, 6 o'clock. Even, they come home at 3:30. I go and see them for half an hour, have a cup of tea, and then I can be back at my desk, finish off, and then go back in and put them into bed. And, for me, that's given me a massive uplift in the quality of life that I have. So that's going to create a behavioral change. So people are going to resist going back into offices, which means are we going to go back and are we going to need all of that infrastructure that we've put in place? And it almost gives you problems on two fronts. It gives you that the office being in the home, you've got invisible threats almost. You don't know what's going on in other people's houses, other people's routers, what's going on with them. That's that threat surface is enormous. But also you've got all this stuff in offices around the world there must have been thousands of offices closed down in London alone. And what happens to all the kit that was in there? And where is that now? What's happened to all of those things that should have been decommissioned? Have they been, or have they just been left in offices? Because we've still got a lease on. We've still got a lease on the office. We'll leave all the computers in there for a bit. So there's hidden risks that I think people probably haven't thought about, because we all left in a panic. It's like the Mary Celeste in a lot of these places. So
yeah, I think that was.
I think
it was pretty interesting watching Boris Johnson's MP run out the back door when they found out Boris Johnson had COVID. Talk about leaving in a hurry.
Yeah. Let's not get into Boris Johnson.
We got rid of our problem here, so we have a new problem. But Rob, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Do you have any questions for us, for the crew or anybody here?
Oh, crikey, that's putting me on the spot now. I want to know more about Mike and the background in your anonymous days. I've tried to read about it, and it's probably a bit hidden. But
it's a long story.
I bet.
A story that took me down some dark roads and took away my freedom for quite a bit of time. But being in London really helped, helping the kids and giving back to the community and really getting back on track. So, and eventually, we started this community, and this is my passion now, is giving back to, the world that we took from, by giving people a chance to, come into cybersecurity, giving them a place where they can learn about cybersecurity. And especially the kids, right? So I'm neurodiverse, and I deal with a lot of kids who are neurodiverse, and a lot of them are potential cyber criminals because they function very well in black and white and ones and zeros. We're very black and white, and they tend to be some of the most, successful when it comes to exploitation, because they see things as it's either on or off, and their math skills and their computational skills are just absolutely amazing. And I wish I would have had an ounce of what they had at that age, and had the support from the families. And what I find is a lot of the families, especially in London, that have kids that are identified as potential cyber criminals, they're very supportive. They just don't understand the kids, and they don't understand the technology. And I think that's where the big gap is right now in the industry and in the world in general, is you have the knows and the know-nots. And I think that's how it's always been. When I was a kid making bad decisions, it was always against people who didn't have that knowledge or thought they had security, but not really. So yeah, my road was pretty long, and I'm happy where I'm at now, and I can give that experience away to people who really need it, and companies who need it. So yeah, I work with Tanesh and Naveen, and really enjoy being on their board and helping out the companies over there. But yeah, the anonymous background is I try to keep it a little cloaked to protect myself, as well as protect the companies I work with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an absolute pleasure having you on.
Interesting.
Go ahead.
So do you think that you're talking about, I guess the kids that were coming up into the IT positions when we were younger,
Mm-hmm.
they were the ones that through the educational ranks in a normal way, and went through university, and then they went into IT roles or project management roles, and then they it developed into security over the years. And as you're saying, that's not necessarily the best way to get into security. There's people who understand the world differently are going to have a natural advantage. So do you think there's going to be there's people like you doing this outreach work? There's quite a lot more of that kind of thing going on now, stuff that Amy's doing with Caps Lock, getting people to changing careers. Do you think we're going to see a tipping point where that's a more normal way to get into security rather than coming up through educational ranks? Because I think my son asked me the other day, well, he was telling me a story, and kind of fantasizing about, oh, when I'm 18, I'll be going off to university. And I just said, well, if you want to, yeah, if you've got something that you want to do at university, but make sure that you do, because when I went to university, it was because it was what was expected of me, and I don't necessarily think that was the best thing for me.
Was it free when you went to uni? Did you get free university?
Oh no, well, no, we had to. Well, my parents paid, but I have a certain amount of privilege. But no, it was not something that I had to think about. Put it like that. It was expected of me, and I did it, and I went and I came out again. And
that's the
I didn't
same for
particularly
me though.
enjoy it.
Like that's the same for me. When I was growing up, my mum and dad were like, "You're going to university." They were like, "You are mine until you are 22, and you'll finish university, and then you can go do what the fuck you want." Whereas my brothers, the first one went to uni. The second one, my mum and dad were like, "He's only 18 now." They were like, "You can go do an apprenticeship or whatever else." And I said, "I think an apprenticeship would probably be more worth your while right now because
Yeah.
you've got work experience."
Well, that's what I think. I think hiring managers. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in the last couple of years. I don't look for a degree. I look for I look for the person. I talk to the person one to one, and if they've got that spark, that's something. You know, it's not about what's written on a piece of paper. It's about, do they understand what I'm talking about? Do they get me? Do I understand them? So you know,
it's like that job description that Greg Vandergast put out. Was it yesterday or a couple of days ago, where he was like, experience required is whatever experience you need to do the job. Qualifications, don't want any qualifications, just want you to be enthusiastic.
I think that's the way it's going.
And I think
the more that we look at how people's minds work and the choices they make and the conversations I have with potential employees is more of, how can they troubleshoot? How do they look at problems? How well do they communicate? I think we've seen with like certifications that not all certifications are what we think they are or what the industry relies on them for. Take for instance, CEH. So back when I started doing what I did, there was no certification for ethical hacker. There was no security certifications. It was just pure passion, taking things apart and seeing how they work. And so that's what I look for. And I think we're going to get to a point where the industry is going to realize that, you know, requiring a $5,000 certification for an entry-level job is just not going to be feasible. I mean, a kid coming out of school, you know, we provide a lot of it. Yeah, we provide a lot of experience just within our Discord and knowledge share for kids coming out of high school to learn the things that they need to learn instead of having to go get that $5,000 certification. You know, so I think we're seeing a change, and I think the pandemic's kind of helped that as well.
Why is that? Why has the pandemic helped that?
I think because of the fact that the schools here in the U.S., the schools are behind. Simply because of the fact of the shutdowns and you know, the time off and stuff like that. So people, you know, kids graduating are a little bit behind. Colleges are on and off depending on what state you're in. So, you know, looking at across the board who has a degree and who doesn't, you know, some of these kids don't have time. I mean, they've literally spent most of their senior year in lockdown. And they want to get on with their lives. So you're seeing a lot more kids going out and getting jobs. And the whole skills gap thing too is just ridiculous. So one of the things that we do at the company I work at is, you know, hire from within and promote from within. And a lot of companies out there aren't doing that. And it's really sad to see entry-level positions requiring like 5 years experience. But, you know, we're trying to build the industry back up and trying to get it moving again. But in the same token, I think it's time to clean or cleanse some of the industry, get rid of some of the ridiculous certifications that are worthless, and look at hiring practices and change the way we look at people.
Yeah, you're right. It's I think you still get the attitude from recruitment that you know, you've got to have, if you don't have a CISSP or a CEH or whatever the acronym is for your particular chosen field.
Rosie said not all recruitment.
Not all.
Yeah, well, I that's why I hesitated. I thought we've got a recruiter just over there that I can't offend.
And we were meant to
It's
have
not hard to offend me. It's okay. Don't worry.
we were meant to have another guest on tonight, weren't we, Rob? We were meant to have your friend Ryan as well, but he's in hospital with a dislocated shoulder. So hope you get well soon, Ryan.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, certainly you used to, and I think to a certain extent you still do. You know, if particularly at entry level, if you haven't got that acronym on your CV, then you're just going to be filtered out, and that's a really bad position for us to be in as an industry, and it's a bad position to be in on the other receiving end of it as well. And again, I have a certain amount of privilege. I got my CISSP in 2006, and I've just let it expire because I just don't use it anymore. Why would I? I'm
in the same situation. I'm in the same situation with the hacking certifications. At one point they were valid. It's to the point now where, do I really want to get another certification? Exactly how much is it going to help me? Because now I've gotten to a point in my career where it's the experience that I've gained that gets me in the door. I just started a new job last month, and when I was going through the interview process, it wasn't about what certifications I had. It was giving me problems and problem sets to solve. And I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to focus more on problem solving and creative minds rather than, black and white, do you have a degree? It's kind of a waste of time. But Rob, I definitely appreciate you coming on. And, if there's anything that we can do for you at the Haunted Hacker, let us know. I'm sure we'll be running into each other again, probably through Tanesh or somebody over there. But I look forward to the next time we get to have a chat with you.
Brilliant. Nice to speak to you too.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
See you guys next weekend for episode number 40. Check out Rob's new company, and we'll see you guys then. Thanks, guys.
See you.
Goodbye.